with Stalin was always a pact of convenience. For some reason, Stalin believed that he was special.
In terms of ruthlessness, bloodlust, Stalin remains one of the greatest villains of the 20th century.
Did you know that the man who would eventually rule the Soviet Union with an iron fist was originally sent to a seminary to become a priest? It is one of history's greatest ironies that Joseph Stalin spent his formative years studying theology. However, instead of saving souls, he would go on to oversee a regime that fundamentally reshaped the globe at the cost of tens of millions of lives. From orchestrating one of the largest bank robberies in history to fund a clandestine revolution, and then becoming the Man of Steel who stood toe-to-toe with Hitler and Churchill, Stalin's life was a masterclass in ruthless pragmatism. In this video, we explore the chilling transformation of a revolutionary outlaw into a ruling dictator. Stick around until the end, because the story of his final days will shock you. Born on December 18, 1878, in the small town of Gori, Georgia, Stalin's beginnings were anything but grand. His childhood was a gauntlet of survival. At age 7, he contracted smallpox, an ordeal that left his face permanently pockmarked and his left arm slightly deformed. His mother, a deeply religious woman, harbored dreams of her son becoming a bishop. In 1895, she successfully sent him to the Tiflis Theological Seminary. However, the seminary proved to be a breeding ground for dissent rather than devotion. Stalin began secretly reading the prohibited works of Karl Marx and Vladimir Lenin. He joined a clandestine organization seeking Georgian independence from Russia, and by 1899 he was expelled from the seminary for missing exams, though his true sin was his radical political activity. By 1901, Stalin had fully committed to the life of a professional revolutionary. Joining the Social Democratic Labor Party, he organized strikes and protests against the Tsarist regime. Stalin wasn't just a theorist, he was a man of action. He proved his loyalty to the Bolshevik cause through expropriations, a polite term for armed robberies, kidnappings, and protection rackets. His most infamous feat occurred in 1907, when he orchestrated the Tiflis bank robbery, stealing 250,000 rubles to fund Lenin's operations. It was during this period of exile, prison breaks, and underground warfare that he adopted the name Stalin, which translates to Man of Steel. When the Russian Revolution finally exploded in 1917, Stalin was not the face of the movement. That was Lenin and the charismatic Leon Trotsky. While Trotsky was the orator and military genius, Stalin was the administrator. He ran the Bolshevik newspaper, Pravda, and quietly handled the boring logistics of the party. After the Bolsheviks seized power and won the subsequent Civil War, the Soviet Union was established in 1922, and Stalin was appointed General Secretary. At the time, many high-ranking Bolsheviks viewed the General Secretary position as a clerical dead end. Stalin, however, realized it was the ultimate level of power. He used his authority to appoint loyalists to every level of the party bureaucracy, creating a vast network of people who owed their careers to him. When Lenin died in 1924, a power struggle ensued. Most assumed Trotsky would take the mantle, but Stalin had already stacked the deck. He played his rivals against each other, isolating Trotsky by accusing him of factionalism. By the late 1920s, Stalin had expelled Trotsky from the country and moved from being a member of a committee to the undisputed dictator of the Soviet Union. Stalin knew the Soviet Union was decades behind the West. His solution was a revolution from above. Starting in 1928, he launched a series of 5-year plans aimed at transforming the USSR from a backward agrarian society into an industrial powerhouse in record time. The pace was frantic, and the conditions were brutal. Coal, oil, and steel production skyrocketed, but workers who failed to meet impossible quotas were branded saboteurs and executed or sent to the gulags, a vast system of forced labor camps. Simultaneously, Stalin forced collectivization on the peasantry, seizing private farmland to create massive state-run farms. The resistance was met with state-sponsored violence. In the Ukraine, this led to the Holodomor, a man-made famine that killed millions. Stalin viewed these deaths as a necessary evil for modernization. As his power grew, so did his paranoia. In 1934, after the suspicious assassination of his rival, Sergei Kirov, Stalin launched the Great Purge. No one was safe. He turned on his own party, executing 81 of his 103 highest-ranking military officers and nearly all of the original old Bolsheviks who had served with Lenin. It is estimated that during the 1930s, 20 million citizens were either executed or sent to labor camps. By the end of the decade, the cult of personality was complete. Stalin was portrayed as a godlike figure, his portrait hanging in every home, school, and factory. Stalin's foreign policy was as cynical as his domestic rule. In 1939, he signed a non-aggression pact with Adolf Hitler, shocking the world. However, Stalin's arrogance failed him where he needed it the most. He refused to believe intelligence reports that Hitler was planning to betray him. When Germany invaded in 1941, the Red Army, depleted of its best officers by Stalin's own purges, was nearly annihilated. The turning point was the Battle of Stalingrad in 1942. Stalin gave the "not a step back" order, demanding the city be held at any cost because it bore his name. The ensuing urban warfare was the bloodiest in human history. The Soviet victory there broke the back of the Nazi war machine. From 1943 onward, the Red Army became an unstoppable tide, liberating Eastern Europe and eventually capturing Berlin in 1945. At the Yalta and Potsdam conferences, Stalin's iron-willed diplomacy ensured that the territories the Red Army occupied would remain under Soviet influence, setting the stage for the Cold War. In the post-war years, Stalin's suspicion of his former allies, the United States and Britain, grew into a fevered pitch. He oversaw the Iron Curtain falling across Europe, turning Eastern nations into satellite states. Domestically, his health began to fail, and his mind followed. He became convinced that his own doctors were plotting to poison him, leading to the infamous Doctor's Plot investigation. On March 5, 1953, the Man of Steel finally fell, dying of a massive stroke. Even in death, his shadow was lethal. At his funeral, the sheer volume of grieving or terrified citizens surging forward to see his body resulted in a stampede that crushed and killed 500 people. Joseph Stalin's legacy is a haunting contradiction. He took a nation that used wooden plows and left it with nuclear missiles, yet he did so by presiding over a state of perpetual fear and state-sanctioned murder. Within a few years of his death, his successor, Nikita Khrushchev, began a process of de-Stalinization, denouncing the very man he had once praised. But the scars Stalin left on the map and the psyche of the world remain to this day. If you found this story fascinating, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss another history session. We're building a community of history buffs, and we want to know what you think. Leave a comment below. Was Stalin a necessary evil for the survival of the USSR, or simply a tyrant?